Hello and welcome along to another episode of Red Tinted Glasses. We are live on Monday night. It's Christmas Eve, Phil. I've got my festive shirt. You were back up in Aberdeen after coming up from Edinburgh, so maybe missing a little bit of your equipment. So I just want to address some of the sound qualities from the last episode where Michael was on his AirPods and maybe the sound quality wasn't quite where you're used to when it's just myself and Phil. Unfortunately, that's what we get sometimes with guests. So I know we tried to improve the podcast here and there, so I just wanted to address that issue from the last episode. Unfortunately, Phil, what we can't address is the product on the pitch improving at this moment in time.
Yeah, sadly not. It's a bit of a miserable day weather-wise. It was then compounded further by the display on the pitch, but I'm hoping it just comes to an end soon. Because it's not been the most pleasant thing to be watching on a Saturday.
No, it's not. But we managed to have a debrief of sorts post-match in the Wig and then O'Neill's as well. So most of our thoughts have been vented, and we continued that with Callum in the group chat today. Unfortunately, he's keeping the Christmas shoppers at ease at Tesco in the build-up to Christmas, so can't join us. Hopefully he joins us if we do reconvene between the Kilmarnock and Dundee United game as well. That remains to be seen. So coming up on the episode tonight, unfortunately, we do have to look back at the on-field action as we'll take a look back at the events from Pittodrie on Saturday as the Dons fell to a 3-1 defeat at home to Hibs. We'll also preview that Boxing Day trip to Kilmarnock, and time permitting, because, well, nobody needs to listen to us ramble on for that long. We might cover the Dundee United game in case we can't convene before then. But, Phil, in a different change, the club announced a statement pre-us coming live, and this regards the future, I guess, of the stadium and where we'll be playing. The club coming out addressing the recent Press and Journal article around the funding towards the stadium proposals, kind of putting forward their side of you, saying that they won't be putting any more money into the project. They've already spent money in doing the proposals. They don't want to have a standalone stadium at the beach. They want to integrate it into a community aspect, which is obviously what we're currently seeing in terms of the redevelopment proposals. I think from kind of what I read from the statement, as I said, that the club don't seem to be keen to put any more money into it. And I very much took, I know what you think of it, I'll let you put your comments across, that Dave Cormack and the rest of the board are very much putting the ball in the council's court. I just think it's absolutely madness that it's very much a he said, she said. There doesn't seem to be any sort of collaborative thinking at this stage. And in my personal opinion, I very much am one of it's city centre / beach or bust. I think Kingsford, as much as we're doing on the pitch and off the pitch with the likes of Mez driving the match day experience, Kingsford would absolutely kill any sort of match day experience at present. And maybe if we didn't spunk so much money trying to put a stadium out in West Hill, we could have afforded a bit more money into proposals around the beach.
Yeah, it's just like you say, it's a really messy situation. I think it was a little bit ridiculous for I think it was Alex McClellan that did the piece in the P&J. I think it was kind of ridiculous for him to do that, and then I think it was equally, it's kind of embarrassing to then force the club to come out and make their own statement. You know, probably the two biggest institutions in the city since Amadeus and Mr. G's was open back in the day. Shouldn't really be clashing heads like that. Like you say, there's got to be some sort of joint up thinking there. It was always destined to get a little bit messy, with the potential of public funds getting involved. But yeah, it was just a bit of a weird statement. I think sort of both parties need to be a little bit more sort of realistic. I think fans would, sort of appreciate the honesty. I think they've both got to hold their hands up and just say it's gone on long enough. It's going to cost a fortune. We're either doing it or we're not. Similarly, I feel like the club's sort of business case for it was a little bit wishful thinking. 8 women's games at an average of 12,000 attendance. It's nowhere near that now, so I don't see that really getting to that point. 8 professional rugby games at 16,000 attendance. What 8 games are you basing that on? Because there's not a professional rugby team in Aberdeen. So yeah, just even the men's team, an average attendance of 16,000. It's been good when we're good, but in the periods that have been bad, it's nowhere near the 16K. So, yeah, I think there's got to be a little bit of a reality check on that front. But much like yourself, I'm very much city centre or bust. Not even just in terms of sort of accessibility to the ground for most folk. It's the knock-on effect it has everywhere else, really.
Yeah, and I know you and Stuart brought up that point about the rugby games as well, which it's very adventurous given how many rugby games we've actually seen at Pittodrie. I'm trying to actually remember the last time we had one, and Keith will correct me. I want to say it was Fiji up here, and you're probably looking about 8 to 10 years ago. But yeah, I mean, what you're commenting on the women's game is obviously no slander to, like, in terms of crowd size. We've already seen it so far when they played at Pittodrie in recent events. I think it's only been the main stand that's been open, and there is a lot of free tickets being handed out to those games. So as much as, yes, it's a good crowd, how much are we actually seeing in terms of paying customers turn up to these games? And again, that does affect your business model when, especially in the current climate, the cost of construction, wood, metal is all significantly rising. So you do need to have the cost to be able to make up for buying or building your own stadium. And this was a point that Northern Lights mentioned to us. He shared his tweet with us before we came live. So his suggestion is ditching the council and building our own stadium where we want, to our own bespoke design / specification. Because of course, if we are tied in with the council, there will be the restrictions of what they want as well. That would allow us to maximize the income, fan experience, and that's what we should be doing. Personally, he'd rather contribute to an Aberdeen venture than a council effort. Do you think if the club did kind of put their head above the parapet and said, look, we're going it alone, but we need investment, fan-led and business-led, there would be a desire there?
I think there potentially would be. I think we see it with a lot of the sort of corporate events that the club runs. I think there's a lot of businesses in the city that would probably pay quite sizably towards a venture of a new stadium. Obviously, if the correct perks were in place, because I mean, much like the venture with the council, things have got to work for both parties, and I think that's obviously always the issue you're going to have when you're not, we're in the unfortunate position where Dave Cormack isn't, a Saudi emir who can just throw millions out of his back pocket. So it's always going to be a tough one, but I think there would definitely be that desire there. But I can't really see it being likely the club going on their own. I think unless you're consistently performing really well on pitch and getting things like European money and big transfer fees and whatnot, we would really struggle to justify that. It could be something that could, as I said about the city centre or or the beach, it could be boom or bust really for the club if they were to sort of spend that amount of money.
Yeah, and I think, as I said, it really feels from what I've read in that statement today, it's well, I guess a retaliation from the club side to the article that's come out in the Press and Journal, but it's almost like a bickering couple. They just need to put some differences aside and sit around the table and kind of come together for the best. And it's kind of awkward because it's almost like we've made our bed and we're away to lie in it now. I just think the club needs to be very kind of careful here that we don't burn too many bridges in case we need a couple of favours. And, I think we're going to be at Pittodrie for a long time still to come. And then the next thing people will start looking at is redevelopment or kind of making sure the facilities at Pittodrie meet the requirements. Obviously, where we're sitting just now in third place, European football would follow. And we know the upkeep that was needed to Pittodrie for last season with European qualification.
Yeah, the football's an expensive game from a business side of view, so it's it's a tough one. I mean, there's a reason people like Burrows and Gunn and whatnot are getting paid the top bucks to make these decisions, and not you and me. because I do not envy the headache that they've probably got going on over this.
Yeah, interesting. Sam Gordon saying this new stadium could potentially define Alan Burrow's career at Aberdeen, given Cormac's taking a back seat. Burrows has to make a success of it if he wants to move on to bigger things eventually, which I feel like he will. I was recently at a kind of club sponsor event, and I think Alan Burrows touched on the fact he was asked, how long is he going to be at Aberdeen for, and he doesn't want to leave until he's achieved what he wants to at Aberdeen. But ultimately, that includes winning trophies. So you'll be here for a long time at this rate, going back to what we're seeing on the pitch. But yeah, I think that stadium debate's one that's going to rumble on and give us something to speak about throughout, especially in January as coming up. And on that rugby point as well, roving reporter Sam Gordon on the case, Tonga 2012. So yeah, even longer than I thought, but just shows how long ago it's been since we've had one professional rugby game in Pittodrie, let alone trying to fit in 8. And I remember when we played that game, the pitch was in a horrendous condition for the game, let alone after the game. So the thought of having 8 rugby games on a football pitch is not something that I'm particularly keen on to see. Right, let's look at the game from the weekend. Unfortunately, Phil, we will get into that 3-1 defeat. 4 changes to the starting lineup. Jack McKenzie coming back in, replacing Jimmy McGarry, Toby Keskinen and Esther Sokler replacing Morris and Nisbet, respectively, and Nicky Devlin returning to the starting lineup, as widely expected, given the news that Jack Milne is out for 12 weeks. Rumours it being a broken ankle. I think Jimmy just defined it as one ankle, one leg. Vinny Bizowen out for 16 weeks as well, as we discussed on the last episode. That was the outcome that we were kind of waiting for. We spoke maybe about 2 changes because we have been doing kind of quite a large number. Were you surprised to see as many as 4?
Somewhat, but I don't think they were changes we weren't expecting. In the news of Milne being out injured, and even then you probably expected Devlin to be in the starting 11 regardless of an injury, if he was fully fit. Likewise, we'd sort of discussed Sockler coming in. The wingers are always just a potluck at this point. I think Jimmy really just judges it on sort of who will maybe fit the mould of the game better at the time. And then with McKenzie being back fit again, probably comes as no real surprise, although I think McGarry was maybe slightly hard done by, because I felt like his performances have actually been pretty good for the most part. He's really grown into the role, but yeah, it comes back to that debate of how many is too many, I suppose.
And I think that's something that we're going to come on to when we look at the Kilmarnock game, based on what we saw over the course of the 90 minutes. But I guess another question that many might ask, but Rob in the Bald asks, we had 2-week preparation for the game. Where was our shape and pressing game? The shape and pressing game in inverted commas for those not watching on YouTube. I think in the opening exchanges, it was there. I was very impressed by that opening stages. We kind of spoke on the last show about us having to take the game to Hibs. I felt recently we've not kind of started at our best, but Toby Keskinen in his natural position out on the left. I mean, imagine playing players in the right position. What happens? Looked a totally different player. Again, I guess kind of shoehorning Jamie McGrath in there on the right wing didn't really work throughout the 90 minutes. But if we look at the first 15 minutes, I thought tempo, style, we were absolutely on it. And I don't think any Hibs fans can have any complaints about falling behind because we were the better team in that opening 15.
Yeah, I thought, you've highlighted Topi already, but I thought him and Clarkson in the first half were 2 players that really looked on it. I mean, Clarkson's takedown from the sky and ball through for the opener was, superb. The sort of play we need to see from him more consistently, really, because it's the quality he has that he just doesn't showcase enough, in my opinion. As you've already mentioned as well, McGrath wasn't looking as effective as he has been at times. I think he was similar to Jack McKenzie, in my opinion, a player that was kind of playing with an eye elsewhere. They just didn't really look I don't know, they just looked a bit all over the place, didn't really look that interested, coasting at times. But yeah, first 15, I had that little bit of confidence back that the team were sort of up in their standard back to where it really should be.
Yeah, and it was, I guess, refreshing to see us back to where, as you say, we kind of should be and the standards should be. But I think you're also right on Leighton Clarkson. I was just noting down that word you used because I've got it for when we kind of come on to the second half to speak about Leighton in particular. But again, it's maybe why a player of his quality is here at Aberdeen and not higher end of the Championship, and obviously having spent time at Liverpool as well, is because that level of consistency is lacking from his game. You're absolutely right, that moment of quality in terms of the takedown, and once again, the through ball and the build up to our goals this season have been absolutely sumptuous. And it was, yeah, a great bit of play and also a great bit of finishing from Topi Keskinen, because I wasn't sure about him kind of cutting in onto his right if he would then go back onto his left foot. But I thought, yeah, he finished it really well. I know we discussed this around both Jamie McGrath and Jack McKenzie. I just think it's one of these things with Jamie McGrath more so that we're almost too scared to drop him because he can produce a moment of magic and he can have that bit of quality about him. And unfortunately, he's not a winger, and neither's Leighton Clarkson. I just think we missed a threat in that first half on the right-hand side. But the biggest disappointment for me was Jack McKenzie's performance. I just looked at him and I thought, you don't look overly arsed for large parts of the game. I mean, you could nail this accusation to a few of them from the weekend, but sloppy in possession. Once again, balls into the box were absolutely atrocious. Either not beating the first man or absolutely flying over everybody, but that seems to be his crossing ability in a nutshell. And I just, certainly in that first half, I just personally was like, I don't think it's really fair on what McGarry's been producing after that, nervy start against Hearts. To see what we were then getting from Jack McKenzie, whether it's contract related, whether it's just building himself back up, having dealt with a hamstring injury, I'm not too sure. But again, was it a position that really needed that change, given we were having a consistent performer there already?
Yeah, I think, I want to give Jack the benefit of the doubt and assume it's because he was still getting over that injury. But yeah, my worry is it comes back to that point you've made about McGrath, where he feels almost undroppable potentially, And I think the fact that McGarry's been dropped so quickly, in the case that even a Jack McKenzie that's not fully fit is getting back in ahead of him, won't do anything to sort of light that fire underneath him a little bit. And I don't think the contract saga is really helping that. Because, he really wasn't where he has been at times in the last sort of 18 months, because he's been an absolute resurgence of a left back for the most part of this this season and the tail end of last year especially. So yeah, really disappointed with how he performed on Saturday.
Yeah, and it's been discussed as well. Obviously he's done exceptionally well, as you say, getting to the level he's done, earning the Scotland call up as well a couple of months back. But as I said last week, I don't see where he kicks on right now. And all I could think of watching that performance on Saturday is, if your head's out of the door, off you go then. Like, you're not showing anything here that a team looking at you is going to think that player's improving my team, unless it's a level below us right now. That's all I could personally think of. But it was just, for me, I think, a general frustration of the team performance as well. And as shown on screen, Andy B was kind of commenting around the fitness around Jack McKenzie. And as I kind of touched on as well, coming back from that hamstring injury, there maybe was a factor on his not being fully fit. But equally, as he touched on, neither was Nicky Devlin. And that is going to be a big concern for Boxing Day, because I'm sure I saw a couple of tweets about Devlin feeling something in the warm-up. He definitely felt something in the second half and ultimately got forced off. Oh my God, the January transfer window cannot come quick enough to get a right back in.
Oh God, well, yeah. At this point, if we've got, if McGarry was potentially not fully fit, as he's had his injury troubles. If Mackenzie's not fully fit, Milne obviously now out for 12 weeks. Devlin potentially out. Obviously not heard anything on that front yet. We could be going into Boxing Day with not a single registered fullback at this point. So to go and then play on a plastic pitch, also not going to help that front either. So yeah, thank God that January is just around the corner. And I think we've said it for a couple of weeks now. It seems to get highlighted every weekend that those reinforcements are much needed.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's been a couple of comments around the depth in the squad. Paul Donaldson highlighting that gaps in the squad starting to show quite badly now. Thankfully, January isn't too far away. Sam Gordon also speaking about January and saying that it's the biggest January in a long time to follow. Here's hoping many incomings as well. He also wants to comment on the booing of the team and wanting people to stop booing at every opportunity. I guess we'll come on to that because despite the positive opening exchanges, there's no really other way of saying this, but things went spectacularly tits up after Hibs equalised. And really, the equaliser was a complete tits up from Slobodan Rubišić, so much so that both of us didn't actually properly see the goal because we were that confident in Ruby's ability to deal with the error that he then went on to make, that when I looked up, the ball was getting stroked into the back of the net, and I thought, what the fuck's going on here?
Yeah, I mean, not only did we let Hibs back in, we let it be the blooming Martin Boyle show, which is the worst thing you want to do at Pittodrie because he was just lapping it up, as was Nicky Cadden. It was just, we've spoken about how much of a bomb scare the two centre halves can be at times, and that was just, I've not really got much words for it. I think Boyle was rubbing his hands. I think he sort of flinched, thinking the ball was let it come flying into his face from 4 yards away, and just witnessed it rolling into the 18-yard box. And it was just, I think that's the best way I can describe it. It's just an audible groan.
But what is going on at the back? There was a tweet as well that came in. I'll try and find it. But my kind of point in the notes that I know I sent to you is, what is Ruby doing, and where does this suddenly come from? It was at Preacher Jam that said, you need to discuss our lack of defending long balls. Because again, it was a simple long ball. The second one, which we'll come on to, was also a long ball. How many goals conceded have come from teams with a simple punt up front? And as we discussed at length with Stewie in the wig after, and there's obviously a couple of points we're going to come on to from that discussion as well. Hibs didn't have to work for their goals. They scored 3, and really, I think the second one you could maybe say was some good play from Hibs, but when we analysed it a little bit more, it's pretty poor from an Aberdeen point of view. But yet again, we're gifting teams goals, and Saturday was the first time I actually felt that this team didn't know what to do once things went wrong, and that was my biggest concern.
Yeah, I mean, I was speaking about this with some of the Four Threads guys afterwards in our group chat, and I think that's kind of been an annoying factor of the season for me. Majority of the goals we concede, teams don't really have to work for them, which is a little bit of a frustrating thing for Aberdeen, especially the run that we're on. It's something that's so easy to sort of clean up out your game, but we just don't seem to learn from it ever, which is just frustrating as a fan. And I know it's probably frustrating for Jimmy. I know it's probably frustrating for the players as well. But I don't know how much of it maybe comes back to, obviously recently we've maybe seen an insurgence of sort of errors. And I don't know how much that maybe comes back to the sort of changing goalkeeper as well, whether Duhan's a little bit less vocal. Because I know from speaking to St Johnstone fans, as well as what you can hear in the stadium, Mitov could shout a blooming house down. He is so loud and he's always communicating. Whether Duhan doesn't quite have that aspect to his game, whether he's a bit slower off his line, it's sort of causing a little bit of nerves between Malloy and Ruby and not really knowing how to deal with it. Yeah, the sooner we've got Dimitar and his pearly whites back, hopefully the better, to see if that maybe stabilises us again at the back.
Yeah, and I kind of did wonder that maybe a little bit on the opening goal as well, because does Ruby need to clear it? If he leaves it, does it go all the way back to Duhan as well? I do wonder how much that change in goalkeeper has affected. But I think West Coast Don makes a good point as well, speaking about both centre-backs still learning on the job. I'll give Gavin Malloy learning on the job. I'm really struggling to give that excuse to Rubezic, given he was here last season, and certainly this season it should be the experienced partner for Gavin Malloy. So I'm personally struggling with that side of things, to say that he's still learning despite his age. We're still seeing the same mistakes, and we both know in our line of work that if we kept making the same mistakes, we would be brought up on it. But he still gets to play week in, week out. Going back to what West Coast Don said as well, we need a first team solid centre back with experience to get a grip of things. In that sense, then, what does Angus MacDonald need to do to get a game?
Yeah, it's a tough one, because, like you say, I've got no doubts at all that Ruby is going to go on to probably be a very, very good centre half. He's got all the traits to be a brilliant modern day ball playing defender, I think. He just needs to basically learn how to do it a bit more. And I think it's very telling, like you say, he's had last season. He's also had a few caps, senior for Montenegro. That's kind of dried up a little bit recently, I've noticed as well. I don't know if that's telling us to sort of either his performances in their camp, or also maybe what's been highlighted now that the spotlight's on him as the more senior defender for us. But yeah, it's a strange one, because there was nothing from Angus's performance at Hearts that really indicated that he shouldn't have been on that pitch. Maybe a little bit of match sharpness lacking, which is understandable given, the fact he's not played and had his injury issues this season. But yeah, really, there should still be a place for him in the squad, especially, again, like we said, the run we've been on, potentially having that more senior head back there might do us a little bit of good.
Yeah, and I know people will argue against Angus MacDonald and saying the fact that, as we've said on here, that the worse our defence gets, the better Angus MacDonald gets. But I think he showed in the Hearts game that he is a calming influence. And fortunately, he couldn't account for the goalkeeper coming off injured and a deflection that saw us concede a goal in that game. But by and large, the defence looked relaxed with his presence in there. I know Rubezic wasn't in there, but he could equally maybe calm Rubezic down. I know people have spoken about his turn of pace, and he's also been responsible for us conceding goals, and he always gets highlighted the Celtic semi-final from last season. But equally, he also made atonement for his error in that game as well by scoring. I just look at what we're doing just now, and the fact that a quarter of Hibs League's goals, Jesus, that was more of a tongue twister than I thought, have been scored against that Aberdeen defence, and we're not changing anything. We're making the same mistakes. Teams are scoring simple goals, and we're still sticking with it. We're changing our striker when they're not scoring. I was going to say we're changing our midfield when it's not working. We're not. We're going to come on to that. But the area where we're softest isn't changing. I don't understand why. Maybe Angus isn't performing in training. that can be the only thing I can think of right now. The other question is, if not Angus, does Richard Jensen get recalled from his loan spell? I don't know if that's an option, but...
Yeah, I mean, it's very possible. I suppose, like you say, it all depends on the terms that are in place between the two clubs. Certainly, maybe having that extra option as not only a left-sided centre-half, but someone who could also go out to left-back if needed as well, would probably be quite welcome, as we've already discussed, the sort of injury concerns there. But yeah, I mean, going back to the point I made earlier about Duhan maybe not being the most vocal leader at the back, again, that maybe makes more of a case for Angus to come in and have somebody there who is, he's had a long career playing at a good level. Yeah, he's been club captain. He's played for Aberdeen whilst they've been in the European competitions as well. He's got that experience under his belt. So it wouldn't, in my opinion, be a bad shout to have him in there, obviously alongside another vocal leader, Nicky Devlin. Having the two of them there could go a long way to just giving that defence a little bit of structure. Because as I said, we just seem to be all over the place at times. The line seems to be a bit off. Players seem to just not really understand their sort of positioning. But yeah, just hopefully a change to come at centre half, if not pre-January, in the window to give us those options.
Yeah, an interesting counterpoint from Andy B saying we actually need to defend better as a team. A lot of focus on the back four, which in my mind is correct. But he points out, was it not McGrath tracking back for the second, and the three midfielders messing up a simple switch doesn't help. Obviously, it was Leighton Clarkson's error for the third goal, so we can't really pin the defence on that. I don't actually think it was McGrath for the second. As I said, we'll come on to that shortly, but I think it was highlighted by Sports Scene. It was actually both Jack McKenzie and Nicky Devlin's high press, which really kind of left us open at the back, but we'll come on to that. In terms of the response from us to the equaliser, wasn't much, was there? Toby Keskinen desperately unlucky with a curling effort bouncing off the post and kind of across the goal mouth. Other than that, I really don't remember us creating much until the second half, but I'm going to save that for now.
Yeah, it was obviously the first half was tough playing in the wind, but we still should have done more. We just didn't really get our foot on the ball enough, and then when we did, we just played into Hibs' hands. If we would go backwards to Duhan, who would then punt this long swirling kick into the air, and we lost the ball again. So it was just a bit frustrating to not try and get back on the front foot, especially like say if Topi scores that worldie from the edge of the box, maybe it's a completely different game.
Yeah.
But we still should have been doing more after that to try and keep that momentum high.
Yeah, and again, I think back to what Jimmy Talene said at the end of the game, where Rob McLean spoke about, if we take our chances. And he's like, yeah, but if the end result is the end result, we can only deal with the facts. Mm-hmm. It would have changed the game, absolutely. Unfortunately, it didn't go in, and our heads didn't kind of seem to be in it after that as well. Again, for me, against Hibs, Graham Shinney losing his mind at something in the build-up to the second goal.
I think he was calling for a foul, I believe, or at least that's what it looked like to me.
Yeah, but he seemed to be doing that about 2 minutes before the goal occurred, and then he still chased down the referee and got himself booked. Although when you go back to most of the match stats, there's no official record of him being booked, so maybe that's another one that's been wiped. But I'm very sure that he was brandished a yellow card before the game restarted. But that annoyed me as well, because I would have rather, as a captain, he was not having a go at the players, but getting the players going rather than moaning at the referee for something that happened well in advance of us conceding.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it comes back to the age-old adage of just do your talking on the pitch. Use that as a motivator. Try and G the players up. Try and G yourself up. Don't get a silly booking, which then forces you to walk a tightrope against one of the quickest front lines in the league. It's just, and I think it's one of those things where I know it's a high intensity, high stakes, high pressure environment. But again, we've spoken about already, as an experienced player, it's your job to kind of be smart with stuff like that, and rally the players around it, as opposed to, like I say, get yourself a silly yellow.
Yeah, and that's, for me personally, that's what it felt like, and I just wish he'd kind of focused more on the playing side. In terms of the goal itself, again, it felt simple. It felt route one. And as much as I said earlier, I thought Hibs worked the ball well. It felt all too easy to put the ball into the back of the net. As Sports Scene highlighted, Jack McKenzie, way out of line, pushed up the pitch, which left both centre-backs dealing with one player each. Hibs exploited the space very well, and when Nicky Devlin had to come back to cover, he opened up his body because he had to deal with Cadden coming in and the other player in the box that his attention was also drawn to, and he was damned if he did and damned if he didn't. Couldn't commit to the ball, and Hibs score. So both our fullbacks caught out of position. Do you think maybe, as much as we're saying, we're conceding soft goals from punts up the pitch, teams are working out our style and probably realising that we don't have the players potentially capable of getting back into position quick enough? Yeah,
I think that's definitely the case. I think especially, like I say, a team against Hibs where you've got Yuan and Boyle who play right on the shoulder. Any mistake or even anything that makes it over the back line, you would probably bet on one of them getting on the end of it, just with how quick they are. Conversely as well, Chris Cadden, Nicky Cadden get themselves so high up the pitch, and they're both very technical footballers. I mean, we've seen it twice this season from Nicky Cadden, the free kick at Easter Road, and then took his volley superbly well at the back post, albeit, he had the whole goal to almost aim at. But yeah, it was just a frustrating goal again to concede. It just felt like Martin Boyle had all the time in the world, didn't really get closed down by either Malloy or McKenzie, had all the time in the world just to get his head up and put it right on a 5 pence for Cadden to lash home.
I think the annoying thing as well is that there's 3 Aberdeen players out there trying to stop the cross, and they're all led on a merry dance down the byline before he puts the ball in the box as well. It really is. It's not a good look. And obviously we've got to come on to the third goal as well. But before we do, I want to speak about the midfield too, because this was a prime discussion in the pub post-match. But Ian Taylor also posed a question to us on Twitter tonight as well. Given the performance of Dante Polvara when he came on, I know you're very keen to speak about that. Ian Taylor asks, does the midfield need to now be built around Dante now that he's back? But Stewie was kind of asking us, or maybe kind of speaking about the fact that one of the midfield 2 need dropped. I think the 3 of us were in agreement on Saturday night, probably would be Shinnie. Do you agree that we do need to maybe look at changing things in that centre midfield now?
I think so. I mean, Saturday was one of the more frustrating games that I've watched of Shinnie and Nielsen. I think as much as we speak about, I think we spoke about this last week as well, potentially, as much as we speak about McGrath and Clarkson maybe treading on each other's toes by being too similar in the areas of the pitch they like to take up, I feel like Nielsen and Shinnie do the exact same thing. I also felt at times the pair of them were, quite prone to waiting for the ball to come to them, and it would just get picked off by the likes of Joe Newell or Triantis, who would just sort of then, drag Hibs forward. And I think Polvara has shown he's got the qualities there, and I think he sort of is that good blend between the two of them, where he's equally as capable defensively as he is going forward. And I think having him adds that extra layer to our midfield and gives us that more dynamic option of someone who is always willing to kind of get his head up and play that forward pass.
Yeah, and I think, as you said on Saturday night as well, he's always that player that's quite keen to get his foot on the ball and move us forward. I think Shinnie and Nielsen are too similar. They're two combative midfielders. We saw in the start Shinnie kind of being a bit more of a forward player, and that was working, but I feel both of them are kind of sitting just now and it's not working. Obviously, that being said, it's because results aren't coming, and if results were coming, we probably wouldn't be speaking about it just now.
I think it's something we said before. I think because their influence is usually so seismic within the team that when they're not performing well, it's just absolutely magnified to the max. And especially with Shinnie being club captain as well, you are kind of looking at him when we're on a run like this to be the player that does take it by the scruff of the neck. So it's by no means trying to throw them under the bus. It's more just they're victims of their own success, really. with how good they were in the first part of the season, especially.
Yeah, and this point from Sugarland is kind of a point I made in the St Johnstone game, where it says, seems to me Shinnie and Nielsen spend most of the time chasing the same ball and leave gaps that get exploited. One sidestep takes both out of the game with space to exploit. Honestly, it feels like I'm watching a 5-year-olds play football when I watch them sometimes, because it's like they're both joined to the hip and they're going in the same direction. And for me, that's the kind of frustrating thing. But again, as we discussed at the weekend, it's more that one's your club captain and Nielsen was a big summer signing. So does Jimmy feel pressure to play both? But equally, Dante Polvara has taken the number 8 jersey. That is a number of jersey you would be expecting to see in your starting lineup every week. So it does come as a bit of a surprise. But again, he's a player working back to fitness, but we've seen already examples this season of players working back to fitness being thrust straight into the starting 11. So why not make that case for Dante Polvara? Yeah. Again, does Boxing Day become the opportunity, or does the plastic pitch, we're not even on the game yet, does that pitch affect some of these players' ability to play?
Potentially. I mean, you're speaking to someone who's probably one of the biggest advocates outside of the Jack Milne fan club for the Georgetown Yaya Toure fan club within Dante Polvara. I think I've said it multiple times on here and on Twitter that if you were to build that ideal box-to-box midfielder, you'd probably build in Dante Polvara. 6'5", good technical player, great range of passing, very handsome, legs for days. I would love to see him come in for Kelly, because I do think when he's came off the bench so far, he has been one of the more positive influences on a game. But yeah, like you say, the plastic pitch could cause a concern there.
Yeah, good to see we're just trying to build a handsome squad by including Dante and Angus in the starting 11.
Exactly.
Nothing else is working.
We'll win the GQ award.
Yeah, at least we'll have won something this season. But I guess when, with the games coming thick and fast, especially at this period of time, we do have to be looking to use the squad. And I guess I feel kind of hypocritical saying that when we've already talked about is 4 changes too much. Paul Donaldson's comment from earlier in the episode about gaps, I guess maybe in the quality and depth of the squad as well. But it does feel that we do have players, we've spoken about Gav Malloy, Nielsen as well, that have played already 40 plus games in this calendar year. We do need to be utilising other options where possible. And certainly that centre of midfield feels like the one area right now where this team does maybe need a freshen up. Dante Polvara is a perfect player to go in, and we've already seen that in the cameos he's produced against Celtic and at the weekend as well. And we've got quality in Ante Palaversa as well. I mean, I've struggled with some of the basic sentences tonight. I think if a Polvara and Palaversa midfield was to come out on Boxing Day, I might definitely look to postpone the review until after Dundee United, because I think a few more tongue twisters would be very difficult after a few bevies watching the game.
Yes, absolutely. But yeah, I suppose it's one of those things. Obviously, now Dante is back fit, it gives us that extra option. But the midfield was probably where we had our most our most depth, really. Like you say, we've not been blessed at the full-back position. Centre halves, not so much. Strikers have sort of dried up, obviously, with Pape being out injured. Wingers are beginning to dry up with Vinny also now being out injured. So, it probably is the area where we could have experimented a little bit more with using that squad. And again, we sort of spoke about it Saturday, kind of highlighted. Felt like they were a little bit late in the changes. 3-1 down for a decent portion by time Polvara and Ambrose came on the hour mark.
Yeah, we'll come on to that because I just want to go back to the comment from Sam Gordon about the booing at halftime. I didn't feel there was kind of to the same level as we had against St Johnstone. I certainly didn't feel there was as much negativity throughout the actual, certainly, passages of the first half. Maybe that's because so many people were plunged into darkness by power outage that switched off the scoreboards and the lighting in both the main stand, and I know you were affected trying to have the toilet at half time as well.
It wasn't actually too bad because everybody got their flashlights out, so it was great. It wasn't too great for the old am I being videoed here, as someone just shining a flashlight on the urinal randomly.
I know, I was going to say that's got different connotations there, but we'll leave that one. But yeah, surprised, understood the reaction at half time, with some people displaying their anger with boos?
Yeah, I kind of get it because it was a frustrating first half. I still think it's probably not the way to go about it just yet. The start of the season, I think, is showing how important the crowd has been. By all means, you can be frustrated. I think the booing was maybe a bit over the top, or potentially it was just everybody celebrating Dan Burn scoring for Newcastle, and they were all just saying Burn. Who knows? Yeah, I can kind of see why it boiled over a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's definitely frustration, as I said, because of where we were to where we are now, and the drop off in that performance. There is a comment I want to bring up once we've finished speaking about the game that maybe kind of adds a bit of perspective. So we'll come on to that in a second, but I just want to touch on the final goal as well, because for fuck's sake, can we stop conceding goals where we don't look who we're passing the ball to? Because that's 2 home games in a row where we've done no look passes and conceded immediately from passing straight to the opposition. I don't know what Leighton Clarkson was thinking in that moment, but I also don't know what happened to him in the second half, because he was a shadow of the player he was in the first half as well. But a terrible mistake, roundly punished, of course, by Martin Boyle, who was absolutely flying. And yeah, kind of really not ended any hope, because we'll come on to the changes, but a real sucker punch in that moment.
Yeah, it was, because I mean, the one thing you want after that first half is to try and come out as quick as possible and, like you say, get it 2-2, or at least be on the front foot for the most part. Even if Hibs did score again, at least make them work for it. I think just the fact that it came from, again, just a really sloppy and lazy pass that was, understandably punished once again. Really, really, really frustrating. I think you could see that kind of sucked the wind a little bit, not only out the crowd, but some of the players as well just looked totally done in at that point.
Yeah, they did. And it was just frustrating because, as you said, we gifted them the other goal. We didn't make them work for it. And we then had to kind of apply ourselves more to get back into the game. Before I kind of maybe finish on some of the negatives for the game, I want to highlight Topi Keskinen's performance. I know Sam Gordon's it's been on screen highlighting Polvara as one of the positives from the weekend. I think a lot has to be said about Topi Keskinen's performance. Looked really comfortable and at home on that left wing in the first half, and didn't shirk any sort of responsibility when moved to right wing back in the second half. Thought he did his defensive duties well, still looked to get forward. Picked up a cynical booking, and to be honest, when we're losing 3-1, I don't want to see players just shirking the jersey. I still want to see that effort. I still want to see that commitment. I still want to see it looks like players care out there. I want to see that they're hurting as much as we're hurting in the stands. And the only player I saw that from that played that length of time was Topi Keskinen. So for me, very impressed by his performance as well. And hopefully we see kind of that as a platform for him moving forward on that left wing. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, I thought Topi, that was probably one of his best games, I thought, in an Aberdeen jersey. It was certainly up there. I thought it was great going forward. His decision making, was one of the things I've maybe been a little bit more critical of him. I thought that was spot on for the most part. On Saturday, like you say, he didn't let that move to right back affect him. He still tried to be as positive as he could. I kind of worried a little bit seeing Morris coming off the bench, and I was getting a little bit of PTSD to obviously the Motherwell game, but I was also just not wanting him to have that sort of thrown under the bus again.
Yeah.
Exactly. You don't want something to affect his confidence from the season that he's sort of had. So yeah, no, really impressed with how Tope kind of just got on with it, and yeah, we'll come on to speak about the right back options potentially looking at the Killy game. But yeah, I guess it was the only thing that I thought was a shame there was that he did obviously get forced into more defensive work and couldn't maybe be as high up the pitch as he would have liked. Which when we were chasing the game, you probably would have liked Tope in some of the positions that chances were falling.
Yeah, which I suppose takes us on to some of the chances that we passed up in the second half. I thought for the first time at the weekend, it was the first time that maybe changes came too late from Jimmy. I know obviously you can't help then going 3-1 down, but it didn't seem we kind of reacted in the manner that we have previously. Quite interesting that the sub up top was Peter Ambrose as opposed to Kevin Nisbet. I know we've discussed a lot on this show around Kevin Nisbet's fitness or severe lack of. Alex Neil looks set to be appointed Millwall manager this week. Could that mean a return to London for Kevin? I don't think any of us would be too disappointed. Although seeing the impact of Peter Ambrose off the bench maybe does highlight the need for a striker. Although I know we were discussing in our group chat today that it's maybe kind of ironic that the chances missed would have been gobbled up by Kevin Nisbet. Although I think it was you that said he wouldn't have got on to the chance where he ran through on goal. But also the post-match interview from Jimmy Tillene as well. That's the first time I've really sensed a sense of frustration and probably disappointment in what he saw from the players at the weekend.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that was, again, another positive from the game. I don't think any of us had any doubts that Jimmy cared and that he was all in on the team and the cause. But I think that post-matcher really highlighted it. Really echoing his frustrations. He knows the standard that the players have was, on the floor for that game. Potentially, he was maybe just a bit frustrated with having to deal with Rob McLean again, whose line of questioning, as ever, was dour to say the least. But yeah, no, you get the sense that Jimmy knows that the players really need to up their level for Boxing Day, or it'll be a really, really tough game.
Yeah, and especially when we'll be going to Tannadice so swiftly after with a manager who will be desperate to prove a point when he's got 3,500 Aberdeen fans behind him who let him know how they felt last time we travelled to Tannadice. So we definitely need to see a reaction at Kilmarnock as well. On Peter Ambrose, I mean, he's very much come in from the cold, but I don't think you're going to see two worse misses from an Aberdeen striker. I thought Miles Story's miss back in the day was probably the worst miss I would see at Pittodrie. But when that pitching wedge of an attempt high into the Richard Donald standoff his shin pad, I thought, fucking hell, we are in trouble if we don't sign a striker in January. I think Callum said that the header that just seemed to bounce off his head with no sense of direction, he was offside anyway. I think for his sake, he would have probably hoped the linesman's flag went up. But when Sokler's struggling and you see that come on, I think a couple of people have mentioned, is there a potential for Duke to go through the middle? Keskinen was probably our only real attacking threat of the weekend. Hopefully Pape's back sooner rather than later.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, it's tough for Peter. He's played in Hungary for a little bit. He's not really had much opportunities in a Dons jersey. I think he really would probably benefit from some sort of, and I'm assuming there is already one in place, but a developmental plan for him, whether it is a loan for a season or two or whatever the sort of decision might be. I think it's tough on him because there's a lot of expectation on a player that really shouldn't have that expectation on him at the moment, in my opinion. But he still does need to be doing a lot better. He's got to be able to stake that claim to merit the more game time. And as we've said about Nisbet, as we've said about Sockler, the sad thing for a striker is you're judged on goals, and if you're not scoring them, it's tough to warrant putting him in the team.
Yeah, I kind of agree about he needs a bit of a development plan, but I think when he's going to be thrust into the team in that manner, we've seen other players kind of step up and take their chance. I think it just shows how raw he still is and how much work's needing done. As always, when we're doing lives on YouTube, we get questions and comments coming in, and I just want to pick up on this one before we do move on to the Boxing Day game. Paul Donaldson commenting about Nicky Devlin and Graham Shinney going off at the same time, and Slobodan Rubezic ending up with the armband. It was passed, I think, to him from Jack McKenzie. He goes on to say the whole thing seemed a bit strange, almost as if nobody wanted to take it. Obviously, DP8 was on the pitch, potential candidate in there as well. I think he's actually wore the armband before. Too much being read into it, or does it seem like it was maybe the thought of wearing it was weighing down a couple of players?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably a little bit reading between the lines for the most part. I think when you're sort of looking at the players that were left on the pitch at that point, your two most experienced players in a sense were Ruby and McKenzie. So it was probably bound to go to one of them in terms of who's been playing recently. But yeah, it did seem just. I don't think Ruby expected it to come his way. At least it looked a bit fumbly when it was coming over anyway. But yeah, I wouldn't be looking too much into it.
Yeah, I think I didn't even notice it at the time, to be honest. That's how much I was paying attention, but it says more about me at the point in the game. As I said, obviously the defeat has left a sour taste, but I guess perspective needs applied to these situations as well. So we'll try and be a glass half full for about 30 seconds. Sculpture saying, cheer up everyone. Remember where we were this time last year. Give Jimmy a full transfer window. He'll be getting in defenders. Hopefully a striker as well. I'm going to add to that. Also, West Coast Don, kind of very early in the episode with a perspective chat, saying perspective required. We never had a great team. We've a developing project. If we had Boyan, we'd be crushing it. Thielen must be given time and funds. And I think that's very important when we look ahead to January, that funds are given and the backing of the board is given, as I said, especially around the defence and the strike force at this moment in time. And there was also a tweet from Paul Cool that I saw as well, where in response to the SPFL Premiership table about where everybody's team was placed, and he says, we've been pished lately, but if you told me we'd be 8 points clear of fourth, one behind second at Christmas, I'd have bit your hand off after last season. And I think, as much as we've maybe chucked away second in a very short space of time, that's certainly how it feels. Perspective of being a third, this time last year, we had Barry Robson disgracing himself in a cup final press conference about how we should be kind of not expecting to go to Glasgow and square up to Rangers. We then had the Neil Warnock debacle, as much as me and Callum were absolutely loving the prospect of him managing the club. We've regrouped, we've progressed massively since where we were last December. We're just going through a bit of a bad spell just now. And yeah, I think the perspective of where we currently are, as I've said for the last few weeks, and I'm hoping I'm not having to kind of repeat myself for the next couple of weeks, is we have that platform, but it is getting to the stage where we do need to now build on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we, probably for the most part, people had maybe set the expectation as a top four finish. I still think that's very achievable. Okay, we're in a bad patch just now. It was always going to come. It's maybe worse than what we thought the bad patch was going to be.
Yeah.
But I think it's given us as fans, the players, Jimmy and all the staff that opportunity to learn and really see what the club and the squad are made of. And if we get back on track as soon as possible, ideally Boxing Day, the gaps we've surmounted over teams that would typically be our sort of opposition for league spaces, has all the potential to regrow.
Yeah, especially, with Dundee United picking up that point at the weekend against Celtic. If we don't, get a victory on Boxing Day, and Dundee United win, that game on the 29th becomes important, and the pressure starts building. Outlets, media, and that the external noise. I'll get there eventually. Will start growing, but we can only focus on one game at a time. I guess that ultimate footballing cliche. So what we'll do now is we'll look ahead to that trip on Boxing Day to Kilmarnock. Unfortunately, it's not a venue where we have a great record. I don't think we've won there in 4 years. Obviously, the pitch we've spoken about might affect team lines. But Kilmarnock not going into this game in the best of form. Just one win in 8, albeit against Hearts, despite playing most of that game with 10 men. However, home really is where the heart is for Kilmarnock this season, and certainly in recent efforts. They've only lost one of their last 5 at home. That was a defeat to Celtic, and that run of 5 games includes beating Rangers and being denied a victory against Dundee United with a concession of a 99th minute penalty. So tough place to go, undoubtedly, from Aberdeen, as we've already spoken about in terms of recent records from us. But I'm sure Kilmarnock will be looking to build on their own recent strong home form.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've already mentioned earlier on in the episode about sort of maybe Jim Goodwin's motivations of an Aberdeen side visiting Tannadice. You've not only got Derek McInnes, you've got Matty Kennedy, Gary Mackay-Stephen, Bruce Anderson, and various other Dons alumni at Rugby Park who would also probably relish the chance to get one over the most likely hungover travelling Aberdeen support on Boxing Day, who I don't envy anyone that is making that journey on the 26th. But yeah, it's not the place you're really wanting to go as an Aberdeen team on this current run.
Yeah, it's definitely not where you would put on your fixture list for Boxing Day. Probably not where you put on your fixture list for most, but I think as well, when we look at this game, Kilmarnock 4 points off the bottom of the table, 3 off the playoffs, and 6 behind St Mirren, who occupy the final top 6 space. Given our recent run of form and their home form, this is going to be a game where they'll be looking as a chance to build that platform on themselves to the bottom, and equally close the gap to St Mirren, who host Rangers on Boxing Day.
Yeah, absolutely. And like Rory said, I think that's probably amplified by sort of how poor our track record has been at Rugby Park. It's probably something that Killie have circled to make an attempt to really claw that back. But yeah, I think it'll be. It's got a real, and I think it's a concern for me. There's a real worry that it becomes a little bit of a cagey game. We're maybe worried to make mistakes. Kelly maybe also worried to concede an early goal, and it just becomes this sort of hoofball nightmare of nobody really wanting to get their foot on the ball and do anything. And I think that in the long run probably plays into Kelly's hands. So I'm hoping we can just go there, really just focus on the basics and try and get back to what made us so successful early on.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I was away to ask, is how much, from our point of view, do we need to go back to basics and what we saw in that August-September time when we just kind of kept it simple, really?
Yeah, I think that's what we need is, I think oftentimes a lot of where our mistakes come from is just forcing it and trying to be too fancy with things. I think what we've done so well is sort of popped the ball around quickly, exploited the space, used the wings to great effect. And I think it's something that we really need to get back to making that a focal point of our game.
And I guess, again, we spoke about the kind of earlier parts of the episode, how many changes would be seen as too much changes? And do you expect, given Jimmy's reaction to, he never named names, but you could maybe imply based on their performance, the disappointment in levels of performance and the lack of right reaction to going behind mentality, maybe even as well. Do you think we might see for this game, or is this going to maybe be an opportunity to say to these players, right, go and right some of the wrongs you've done? But as we've already discussed with Dundee United coming up on the 29th, does a little bit of squad rotation come into it as well?
Yeah, I think definitely, and I think it's a tough one as well. Like we've spoken about, I think a few of the changes will be influenced by potential injury concerns. I would like to see Palaversa getting into that midfield, like I've already said, somebody to get their foot on the ball and sort of be a bit more positive with it. But then conversely, you're not wanting him to then be set back with what's already been sort of injury rehabilitation for him. Similar with Polvara. Concerns over the fullback, potential injury situations there. As much as it gives myself PTSD and probably the majority of the Dons fans PTSD, are you then looking at a potential back three to go to Rugby Park? To save putting the likes of maybe Tope at fullback again. So I think it'll be really interesting to be influenced by conditions, injuries, and then, like you say, with a slight eye to the 29th, as much as Jimmy says that moments like that don't really affect his thinking in a game.
I think the biggest one definitely is going to be the fitness of Nicky Devlin. For me personally, I'm probably not risking him if he's not fully fit, because I think that Dundee United game is going to carry a lot of importance. Certainly with even Dundee United's ambitions of where they finish this season as well. We've spoke about the fact that they hadn't played Celtic at all this season up until the weekend, and like us, they've taken a point off Celtic. So personally, I'm not risking him. We've seen Jamie McGrath there at right back. He's not a winger. He's not a right back either, but would you shoehorn him in there, and that allows someone like Shaden Morris, Duke, who are maybe more natural wingers, into the starting lineup as well? We spoke about it as well at the weekend. Graham Shinney, again, not naturally a right side defender. It's going to be at this rate. Joey McGarry or Angus MacDonald are going to be seen at right back. I think that's going to be the biggest one when the team news comes out. Again, I wouldn't be opposed to a change in the middle of the park. And I guess the problem again for us is up front, because the musical box made a point when we were speaking about the defence and the pressure they're coming under from us as fans. The defence is the same for as it was when we had all the wins. What's changed is we've now come under pressure at the back because we're toothless up front, I should say. And I think there was another comment from somebody else earlier in the episode as well, which is obviously great to see all the interactions here on YouTube, that earlier in the season, we were very ruthless. Teams were scared by what we could do up front. We don't carry that same potency currently up top. And without that lack of potency, teams are now kind of attacking our weakness in the defence. And that's unfortunately causing us problems.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it's, as a Newcastle fan, it's a bit like Kevin Keegan's entertainers, just go and try and score 5. Doesn't matter if you concede 4. As long as you score more than the opponent, it's all good. But yeah, I think, again, it's kind of been highlighted on this run. The goals have sort of dried up around, that were sort of evenly spread around the squad. Like we saw earlier on in the season, and it has kind of put that focal point on the attacking players who, unfortunately for our sake, aren't really producing them. So yeah, potentially some changes up front. I think after Saturday, you've really got to make the case for Tope, obviously retaining his spot. The striker position has been up in the air, as it has been for the most part since Pape's been out, and then right wing, whether we see McGrath shoehorned in there again or look to potentially unleash Duke to cause some misery in Ayrshire, will be interesting to see.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is that we're just throwing out names there with kind of any real certainty of what we might see. Andy B saying he hopes Jimmy Tilleen's kind of learnt from recent games where other teams are pressing our midfield and their wing backs are marking our full backs, so kind of nullifying our attacking threat and then countering us in the middle of the pitch as well. West Coast Dawn saying both Dante and Palaversa would raise our height, our passing ability, and the youthfulness in that midfield as well. But also would give the likes of Nielsen and Shinney an ideal break in this game, because I think that Dundee United game is going to be a lot more combative than certainly Boxing Day will be. But I mean, whoever we play up front, you've got to be providing the service to, and that's going to be a big challenge this weekend as well. It's not even weekend; it's going to be Thursday. I've lost track of days, and it's not even Christmas yet.
Yeah, honestly, I don't even have any days of the week at this point either. But yeah, I think it's a tough one because, as we said, looking at the Hibs game, Clarkson had shown flashes of that ability to produce that we all know that he's got. So whether he gets that role without McGrath potentially there, allowing him to flourish and sort of wear that wear that badge as a creative outlet. Whether that would work for us. I think it'd be interesting to see.
Yeah, I think kind of seeing some of the comments coming in about Duke kind of being our striker of musical boxing, that's kind of been his natural position. Sam Gordon and saying a Keskinen and Duke Morris front three would be prime Barcelona. Again, Shaden Morris, maybe people will be having question marks around, does he start giving Jamie McGrath's performance at the weekend? But I'm still yet to be convinced that he's a starter for this Aberdeen team. So as much as we've sat here and we're like, don't change it too much, well, we need to change it too much. They're so kind of just shows kind of maybe, I guess, going back to some of the comments that this team very much is still in development, it is still work in progress. But we've put the work in that August to early October period to give us that platform. And as Michael kind of said on the last episode, where unfortunately every team in this league goes through winning spells that chuck them up the league, then go down, we're just need to get back on that upward trend, and hopefully that starts on Boxing Day and gives us a little bit of Christmas cheer, because Saturday was not very Christmassy.
No, yes, it would be nice to, like I say, wash away those festive hangovers with a nice win in Ayrshire.
It would be, and then of course we've got that trip to Tannadice to think of as well. We've already been on for quite a long time tonight. Thank you to everybody that's liked the video so far, and a lot of you commenting along with your thoughts on what Jimmy needs to do. But I think what we'll do is we'll probably leave it there, Phil, because we've captured quite a lot in the episode tonight, and I'm in desperate need of a strepsil before I pass out from coughing too much every time you're speaking. So thank you very much to yourself for your contribution tonight, and more importantly, thank you to everybody tuned into the episode tonight on YouTube and commenting and liking the videos. I've already said. I hope you all have a very Merry Christmas, and we'll be back. We'll try and get a show in between Kilmarnock and Dundee United. If not, we'll round everything up after that Dundee United game. So have a good Christmas, folks. We'll see you next time.